Greetings, everyone, and today is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and I tell you, you couldn't ask for anything better. Oh man, this has been uh, really interesting in all the events going on across the globe, and folks, oh man, let me find some way to get situated. It cooled down out here in the south, and it's been in the 90s everywhere, and for the past couple of days it got down to like the 60s. It was amazing. I even had to turn on the heat for a minute. But oh man, okay. Oh, y'all, what the hell is going on? What's going on out there? Y'all, look, many of y'all should know already, but basically the way things are panning out right now, all this stuff going on here in the States is self-inflicted. It didn't have to happen this way, but the way prophecy was told, people didn't think it would play out like this. But really, the colonists are shooting themselves in the foot. And I have to put it like that because that's exactly what it is. Use Gaza, what's going on in Palestine, as your example. And there's a lot tied to that as well that people are not paying attention to. People don't know history. But for those who are what you call Negroes, blacks, coloreds, African Americans, that's not a nationality. As you know, I've said this many times before. That's a tag that was put on our people during apartheid here in the Americas. And when the Europeans left, they had to disconnect the people of African descent from the land because the history of the Americas even runs deep. It goes back millions of years, literally millions of years, when all the continents were connected. So what you know as America actually is a part of Africa. What you know as America was once conjoined with the continent of Africa, along with Antarctica. They were all connected together. And those were actually the dominions of Ham and Cush, the dividing between the land between Father and the Son. Okay, it's in the Circle 7 Quran. And excuse me, there's a lot of noise, background activity going on. But they had to separate us from the land, our people. So they renamed us Negroes. And then they changed it to color. Then they changed it to black people. Then again to African American, which you know is two continents. But they never associate you with the land. And ours is a stolen history, a stolen identity, because who we are as a people goes so far back that many of our own people forgot. That's why I get kind of disturbed when I see someone that looks like me calling themselves black people or calling themselves African American, because they don't know. They've been dumbed down so bad that they think that that's an identity and that's who they are, when it's not. That's actually admitting to be chattel property, wards of the corporation that put you in slavery. So if you're admitting to be Negro, if you're admitting to be black, if you're admitting to be colored or African American, you're basically saying you are corporate and you've been assimilated into the corporation and you're admitting to be chattel property. So that's all tied to the democracy and all of that is separate from the Constitution. So you basically have no rights, and like I said, it goes much deeper than what you're told and what you're thinking. But there's so much going on. I didn't even know this. And there's so many twists to this. Because with the BRICS and what's going on with BRICS, that was inevitable. Okay, Nobel Ali told us the uniting of Asia. Well, you got to realize those you call Negroes, coloreds, blacks, African American, are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites. Now you must know. Oh, and the reason why I had to do this quick video, I hope I can make this quick. The ancient Canaanites go so far back, and you got to realize people of African descent are very diverse. Okay, so you got people that got the skin color, right? But don't go by skin color. Don't do that, because a lot happened. But being the first humans on the planet Earth, all right, you had to have skin that looked like this. You had to, because there was no other. I mean, there was no other type of people. That all came later. It really did. It all came later. So every human walking the planet Earth has to have some sort of association with someone of African descent. So that's why they play it down. They whitewash it. They tell you, don't pay attention to that. Look at this over here, So they talk about all these other cultures and all that. But everything is based on people of African descent. When I heard the situation of Palestine, and my heart goes out to those people, I'm going to tell you, because they were occupied by Europeans claiming to be the chosen, and that God somehow told them that they're entitled to that. When, if you're going by the real scriptures, if you are, they weren't Caucasian. They really weren't Caucasian. They're playing on people's ignorance, because people don't read, people don't know history, so they're playing on your ignorance that you don't know. So if you're backing what's going on over there in Palestine against those people, if you're backing that, then you're part of the problem, the illusion, because they weren't Caucasian. Now, that's going to bother a lot of people, because the whole system has been based on that. But unfortunately, it's not the truth. For them, it's unfortunate. But it is what it is. Those who know have been told, you don't talk about that. You let that go. As long as the people are asleep, as long as they continue to worship and do what they do, you don't say anything about that. So now it's coming into the light. The Chinese know the real deal. They know what's going on. The Russians know. The Iranians know. So many cultures know, except for our people. But then I heard that the Arabs, and I couldn't believe it, Arab people, they really don't like African people, African descent. It shocked the heck out of me, because I said, what the heck? How is it? How is it an Arab? How is it an Arab can look down on someone of African descent when, like everybody else on the planet, that's who you come from? If it wasn't for people of African descent, you wouldn't have that skin tone, that olive skin tone that you have, like people in Southern Europe. They have that because of people of African descent, the mixing. That's what all that is. So when an Arab, frowns or looks down on someone of African descent, it's like you're poking at yourself, your own history, because everything, your reason for being, comes from people of African descent. I can understand why Caucasians do it, because they look so different than us. I understand why they do that, but really they can't do that either. They do it, but they really Out of ignorance, they say, "Oh, we're different. We're not like you," and da da da. Okay, fine. It's a cultural thing, but technically speaking, your reason for being here is because of people of African descent. All day long. So when I heard this about Gaza and the people of Gaza, I understand they can't really admit the fact that Palestine was once the land of Canaan. They may talk about it, but then they'll erase your African history from Canaan and say, we Palestinians, Arab Palestinians, are the descendants of Canaan. Here's the problem with that. You got to know history. You have to, if you're admitting to be Canaanite, if you are, you're admitting to be African. Because here's the thing. Ham, who's the father of all African people, had 4 sons. 4. Cush, Mizraim, which is Egypt, Put, and Canaan. He had 4 sons. Now, think for a minute. If you are admitting to be Canaanite, you're admitting to be the child of Ham, which means you look like me. Because I'm a descendant of the ancient Canaanites. It's written in Circle 7 Holy Quran. It's written in Georgia House Resolution 1203. In black and white. Can't miss it. So, I had to think. They can't speak the truth. So if you lie, if you're going to lie about it, that means the Israelis know this. Because they know they're wrong about what they're doing. But they also know that the Palestinians are not the ancient Canaanites. They know this. That's why Netanyahu does it. It's not about the biblical thing. They use that as a front. But deep down inside, the story goes, he knows the Palestinians are not the true descendants of Canaan. And that land that the Bible is referencing are people of African descent. The children of Ham. And if you're a child of Ham, you're going to look like me. All day long. Because the Arabs are in our family. They are. But it's only because of the mixing. You know, Hagar, you know, that bloodline. You know, when you talk about Ruth the Moabitess and all that. And Hagar, you know. That bloodline coming from that. But that's all from the mixing, folks. From Yaqub. So it's a messed up situation, but the lies are going to come out and out in the front and open for everybody to see. And just like with the Europeans and the Caucasians, it's all coming out in the open, and now they're going to be exposed for who they are, and it's not going to be pretty. So here's the deal. Oh, man. Here's what's going on. Everybody must reap what they have sown. People of African descent, those you call Negroes, blacks, colors, African Americans, I'm going to start there because everything's happening with the children of Ham. They lied on us and said that Ham was cursed. They lied. So, but you have to return to the truth. You have to return to the law. All right? So that's why, and I usually start my videos out with my libations, or I give thanks to those that got me to where I am today. And I want to pause for a quick minute and say, I give thanks to Enki. I give thanks to our Lord Enki because if it was not for him, I wouldn't exist. And all of us. But nobody wants to give Enki credit. But he was the chief scientist. He was the one that made this happen. He was the one that sent the revelation to Atrahasis, not Noah. Not Noah. If you read the Anunnaki Bible, it was a man named Atrahasis who received the revelation from Enki about the impending flood. And the flood was actually caused by his brother Enlil. Y'all, this story goes deep. But they rewrote it in the Bible and other books because they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that. But I give thanks to Lord Enki always, always. I keep images of Enki all around me. I'm hooked on Enki for real. But there were other players involved. So to keep the covenant alive, there were others who got involved. And that's why I always will give thanks to those like the jinn, those like the serpents, those, oh my goodness, there's so many of them. My mind is just all over the place. But just to give you an example, the dragons, for example, all right? And I'm talking about the pure bloods, all right? Not the hybrids. Not the hybrids that's kept us in slavery. Because, see, there are those who identify as dragon, as the serpents, the nagas, and they're not the true, the ones from antiquity. I'm talking about the ones that actually came from the creation. All right? But I give thanks to them because they're the ones, y'all, they're everywhere. They're everywhere, and they've been watching. That's why if you live anywhere near the woods or anywhere with a lot of trees, where it's dense. Yeah. So the history runs deep, but there's a lot that the people don't know, the masses don't know. That's why I tell y'all, eventually you're going to wake up anyway. You're going to wake up. So if you're out there worshiping the Lord and praying on your knees, you better get up off the knees. Because you were never told to do that. You were never instructed to do that. That's something men who wanted to enslave you told you to do that. You don't do that. Because you were created in the image of the gods. They gave you were in the likeness of the gods. That's what Enki said. He never instructed anybody to pray and to do all these things like what you see today. All right. So, folks, what you call the United States is a corporation. You have to have a nationality, which they call themselves Americans, do not, because America is a continent, right? All right, you all know that, right? America cannot be a country. It's a continent. And the United States of America is written to every sovereign nation on the American continent. Mexico, Brazil, for example, Colombia is the United States of America. So these so-called United States of America, the so-called 50 states, that is like an oxymoron. It's like, no. Because to be an American, by definition, you must be indigenous. And it ain't the Indians. It ain't. Because, again, just like with the Palestinians, calling themselves Canaanites, if you are in fact indigenous to Americas, if you are, you have to look like me. And here's the reason. Because what you call the American continent from the South Pole to the North Pole was once conjoined with the continent of Africa. It was under the dominions, the promise, the covenant by the gods given to Atrahasis, who handed it down to his son Ham. Y'all, I can't make this stuff up. And I promise I won't cuss, But yeah. So all you adepts that so-called know the truth, some of y'all may know, but then there's some of y'all that may not. And it's scary because you're supposed to know this. But, yeah, it wasn't Noah. It was Atrahasis that received the revelation about the flood. Atrahasis had a son named Ham. Now, he had other sons too. But Ham was given dominion over what you know as Africa and the Americas and Antarctica. They were all conjoined as one. Due to continental drift, they split apart. And this happened millions of years ago. So it's written that the ancient Canaanites left the land of Canaan, went into Egypt, got permission from Pharaoh, Mizraim, again, another son of Ham, and said, you Canaanites will go west. And it's written that they formed kingdoms along North Africa, which is today Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and those who crossed the river, what you call the Ibri. And they went and established kingdoms in what you know as the Americas today. We did not know what a Caucasian was, and we did not know what an Indian was. It didn't happen yet. And many of the original ones were mixed with Asian. So that whole thing really has been so watered down over time that even they don't even look like themselves no more, because you got Caucasians calling themselves indigenous now. Ain't that a bitch? I said I wasn't going to curse. I said I wasn't going to curse. But ain't that something? You got Caucasians calling themselves indigenous because they mixed with the so-called Indians, who are actually Asian. Asiatics who came into the continent out of Asia. You can't make this stuff up. But it all boils down to the firstborn. And that cannot be denied. Because if you came before us, prove it. If you came before anybody of African descent, whoever you are on this planet Earth, if you did, prove it. Because I'm not aware of it in history books. I'm just not aware of it. And the truth is coming out. And Africa is actually waking up. And once Africa wakes up, anybody of African descent is conjoined with that energy. I'm telling you. Everybody, there's some activity going on. Y'all, I'm in Georgia, and there's been a lot of activity out here, and I'm out in the woods in the sticks. But when I see planes and helicopters going by, that's not good. So there's some military activity going on or something, and I would not be a bit surprised, because like I said, you couldn't ask for a better outcome. Trump is actually fulfilling prophecy, I swear to you. He's fulfilling prophecy, y'all, because everything he's doing is backfiring. Everything that man is doing is backfiring. So all you can do is study. Don't get caught up in the nonsense. Prepare. Know what money is. Because if you're holding on to your dollars, your paper currency, you're holding on to debt. And you're holding on to something that's phasing out because they're going to get rid of it. They're going digital. So you're going to have to go to constitutional money, and you got to know the Constitution. And remember, the Constitution guarantees and secures your rights. Okay? So let that sink in for a minute. If you're touting the democracy, a democracy is not constitutional. It's not written in the Constitutional. It's not written in the Constitution. So when you got folks telling you, well, our democracy and our democratic ways and all that, democracy in itself stands for by mob rule. That's what democracy means. By mob, M-O-B, mob rule. And in a democracy, you don't have rights. You're granted privileges in a democracy. Now let that sink in. Because many of y'all, and I gotta say, and I don't mean to insult people, but you're so stupid. It don't sink in with y'all. Constitution only guarantees a republic. In a republic, your rights are guaranteed and secured by that Constitution. But if you're claiming a democracy and you're in a democracy, well, you can't use the Constitution as your defense, idiot. So when a politician gets in your face talking about our democracy, you ask him or her, ask them, who is this democracy that they're talking about? Because it's not constitutional. Ask them. And stop playing. Why y'all playing? Shit hitting the fan. I said I wasn't going to curse. Everybody around the world hates the U.S. And for good reason. They're tired of being bullied. And those calling themselves Negroes, blacks, colors, and African Americans, y'all better wake up. Your nationality is Moorish American. Read Georgia House Resolution 1203. Read the Circle 7, Holy Quran, chapter 47, lines 1 through 10. If you don't believe me, read it. I'm giving you two references. One from the Moors and one from the Caucasians. So, folks, it's up to you now. So if you want to be black or African American, then be that. But don't complain. Because you're admitting that you are property of the state and ward of the state. And the state owns you. So they created the African American. They created the black person. They created the Negro and the colored. So if you're saying you're that, if you're admitting to be that, then okay. Don't cry. Because they made it clear they want to destroy you. And so far it's been working based on your ignorance. So stop that. I know you're used to that, but stop that. You have to change your mindset. You got to change. And it's tied to religion as well. Because what was given to you is not yours. It wasn't created for you. You never worship something that don't look like you. Don't do that. Why do you think they feel at ease doing what they do? Because it looks like them. They created it. See what I'm saying? You go any other culture, they ain't worshiping like that. So don't you do that. All right? So peace and eternal life to everyone. I just want to put that out there real quick because there's some nonsense going on, but it's going to get worse. So folks, hang in there, you know. Be good to others and good to yourself. All right? And just do your best. Just do your best. And please study. All right? Seek the truth. Peace and eternal life to everyone. Till next time.